How's it going, YouTube? My name is RoShawn. I thank you for tuning in again. I am here with Paula. Uh, don't tell me. Let's see. It's Paula Oppedisano. Is that right?
Good enough. Oppedisano.
Okay, Oppedisano from the Carolinas. She has a background, or her bio starts with being a survivor. One. She has professional experience in mental health and addictions. I think that's you worked with or in the addictions field for 20 years. Family services, youth case management, and you work with young offenders and residential placement. I'd like to welcome you, Paula. Thank you for coming. And for the viewers, this YouTube channel, we normally talk about why the sex offender registry laws should not fit, or it should not be one size fit all, and how the laws need to change because they are unconstitutional in many different ways. And we also talk about how these sex offender laws protect people that cry wolf, even when it may not be a wolf. These laws, and I'm not saying people don't do heinous crimes or commit heinous crimes, they do. But this law actually caters to a group and demonize sometimes others because we don't take the time to actually dig deep into what has happened before we start prosecuting people. So, my first question, Miss Paula, should I call you Miss Paula or should I call you by your last name, Miss O?
No, Miss, you don't even. Paula's fine.
Okay. So, Paula, when you say you're a survivor, does that mean not the well, actually, I do want to take you back. Does that mean you were actually raped or somebody actually touched you inappropriately?
Well, my own experience is with multiple experiences growing up, in a household where there were sexual offenses, and then going to school and experiencing that, on a different level, more like rape, and and then as an adult coming out of that, it creates a situation where you are not as conscious. You never learned proper judgment, and so your choices are skewed, right? So that's from the position of having been a victim of.
Not to interrupt you, but when you say like more like rape, experiencing it like in the school, like what do you actually mean? Like, was this a teacher or?
Well, it was a peer that
Were they
was
like
raped.
sexual slurs or like somebody make?
No, I mean your typical party, right? Where everybody's drinking, and um the concept that consent still exists flies out the window. So experiencing it in that kind of situation confuses the situation further. Like if even if there wasn't alcohol involved, um even because there was, no means no at any step, any stage of the game. So what my point is, the no gets quieter when you have been offended earlier in life, right? And then with actual offenders, they learn that it's easier.
So, Paula, are you saying like these parties that you attended when you were younger, you've been in environments where people may have drunk a little bit too much and wouldn't stop hitting on you? Or are you saying they touched you? And what
I'm
touching you or took something from you?
I'm
'Cause I'm
saying
confused.
they refused. They, how can I say it other than a generic term is rape, right? It's a refusal to accept no. And
As far as hitting on you or taking something from you. That's what I'm not.
raping,
Okay.
raping and pillaging. So what I'm trying, like my point is, what I'm trying to get across is the boundary issue, that the whole concept of someone being offensive is the conversation stops when somebody is forcing their will on you, whether it's to take, you know, something that you don't want to give, whether it's sexuality, whether it's money, whether it's signing something permission. The whole beginning, it starts with a violation. And for somebody falsely accusing, this is in my experience, somebody falsely accusing somebody, it's a violation. So they're whatever offense they are attempting to use to violate the other person, you know. And
Okay. Okay. So no, I'm listening to you. I'm here, right? So when it comes to say rape, right? Everyone who say rape wasn't actually raped. But do you, or let me ask you, do you believe that everyone that say rape, there was actually a rape involved, or that they were actually raped?
you know what? Now let me try to like say this clearly. Come at first, okay? Originally coming from a place of having been a survivor,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been the believer, you know, like we have, you know, we want to listen to our children. We want to believe if something happens to them. But as an adult, I had a young adult woman who accused, who said that somebody abducted her and threw her into a van, and you know had raped her and then dumped her on the side of the road. Okay, and then you know the police were there, and there was media. Okay, and everybody was going nuts, including me. Everybody was up in arms, you know. And it was my first experience with a woman who who it wasn't she wasn't falsely accusing an actual person. She was creating a completely uh false scenario, false situation.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my first eye-opening experience, because obviously I respect the vulnerable. I want to make sure that people aren't exploited, taken advantage of, or harmed. So that was a real eye-opening situation.
Yeah. So yeah, because people certainly make up tales. Why? You know, it gets me. You know, like I mean, I can understand why. You know, people do it, but then again, I can't. You know, like trying to
But you know what? This
trouble.
particular woman, RoShawn, this particular woman, she did tell me she was one of those people that, aside from like maybe mental health problems, that she was very honest. And she said, well, you know, her family was in complete turmoil and she really felt completely unloved. And that's, she had to go to those lengths to get any type of
Hmm.
care, right? And it's wrong. It's just as wrong as an offense. But that's where it was coming from. Feeling invisible, not cared about, not nurtured in any way. And then another false accusation, a friend of mine, it was in the military, where the woman wanted to get out of the Navy. She couldn't stand it. And because she was enlisted, she couldn't. So she made this false accusation. And, you know, that particular person was very lucky that she ended up telling the truth.
You can't. So as a survivor, why do you think people lie about rape? Don't you think that actually hurt, you know, like real, like,
Oh my God, yes. Of course, yes. It's, I mean, that's why I'm saying it's just as bad. It's just as bad because you're using such a vulnerable situation and you're harming others because it causes doubt. That's why when you, like, with people in situations like high profile people, you know, because I have so many friends that are, and I believe them because of the consistency of my relationship with them over time. And so the problem from a survivor's perspective is being believed, right? And it's directly opposed to an offender or a falsely accused offender. They're trying to prove their innocence. I'm sorry, my cat is trying to sabotage this whole thing. About to jump on the computer. His name's Bounce. So like that has always perplexed me, you know, like when you have a high profile situation, where there's multiple accusers, and we know that now more because at least people have come up from silence around all these issues. Thank God, you know, that's why I have so much respect for what you're doing, bringing these issues to the table, you know. So it seems like it's innately in each scenario, it's the survivor wants to be believed. You know, it's not easy when you really have been offended. It's the last thing you want to do. You know, victims, we'd rather not, you know.
So let me ask you this, right? Because you said in the beginning how, you know, that young lady, you guys figured out she had a mental health issue, you know, and she make this story up and everybody is all up in arms, including you know, but yet you all find out it was because she felt like she was lacking love or missing certain things in her home front that she wished she had, right? So then, you know, we say, now we're talking about the problem for the survivor. One of the problems for the survivor is being believed, right? Now, when we think of people that create scenarios that do not exist, and yet someone get pulled into the scenario for rape, and the biggest problem for that person is being believed because the first thing everybody hear is rape and everybody all up in arms, and the only thing anybody can think of is this heinous crime that you are being accused of, even when there have been no crime.
Right.
And it's like, now my problem is with the Me Too, when everybody, you know, so strong up on protecting and reserving, you know, the rights of those.
Right.
Like, how do we, you know, like when it comes to people believing us, like, how do we, you know, like, it's tough. This
It feels like an impossible situation. It's like, it's, I get how, until I met people over time that falsely accused and people who were falsely accused, until I experienced those scenarios, I really felt it's almost like, without thinking, it feels like some sort of moral obligation, right? Until you meet someone who admits having falsely accused, made up a false scenario, and then someone who was falsely accused, and you're powerless.
Right.
Person who's been falsely accused it's hard. It's like, it's more horrible because somehow sexual offenses are different.
Totally.
Well,
And
they're looked at differently. And what my fiance Stuart we were just talking about, right?
mm-hmm.
Was the fact that there's, you can murder somebody, you can beat someone almost to death, you can abuse your children, you can abuse your spouse, but there's not a separate registry. You are not on, you're like, there's still, if once a person has been convicted, there's this assumption that sex offenders don't change. The recidivism rate is low. Okay. That's so a registry is making that assumption. Well, why don't we have the murder registry and the almost beating your wife to a pulp registry? Why don't we have the false accusers registry? Do you know what I mean? And so he opened my eyes to that when we were talking about, is the sex offender registry constitutional? Is it based on fairness? Well, no.
Do you think the criminal justice system is racist?
I think that it's profoundly affected by systemic racism. Yes. We also had a conversation about that, because Stuart is he's intelligent in that big way. And we were talking about that, the systemic racism. And I mean, I've been very involved in Black Lives Matter, and learning. I don't think people understand what systemic means. I don't think they understand the depth of it.
Yeah, I did a little research on you before you came on the show, actually. I know I'm public. I'm everywhere. You can find me. You look me up. I'm all over the place. But I did a little research, and you had a quote that it was actually calling out the criminal justice system for being, inadequate. So, it made me think, okay, who am I talking to today? Who is Paula? So I'm happy I'm talking to you. My next question is, do you believe the criminal justice system take advantage of uneducated people and young adults?
Oh, dear Lord, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think that the biggest problem is poverty, not being able to, not being able to afford quality representation. And, what the whole thing at the border is an example also, of children being expected to stand in court alone. And that's what it's like for a young person who has made a mistake, maybe a big one, or a young person who's being accused of something that they had nothing to do with, is completely relying on someone qualified to understand how the law works. And so I think that's one of the biggest problems is a lack of understanding about how the law works, and a lot of times not being able to afford an attorney who's really savvy to how the justice system works.
Hey, Paula, you remember when the Me Too movement first started?
Yeah.
Did you come out and rally and advocate for the Me Too? Did you promote it, push it, just uplift it in any way?
Well, like, I was glad that the lid was coming off of the issue. So I was saying me too to everything. Which
So you was glad the lid was coming up and off for
yeah, like,
have you ever stood out or stood against women who create false scenarios like your neighbor? Have you ever called it out, promoted it, uplifted?
You know what? I don't think I really did a lot of like in the Me Too movement. I don't think what's it called? Like what you're doing. I don't think I built a platform for that. You know, like
we don't need platforms, to just stand against. Like if I got a brother, cousin, sister, neighbor, best friend that's doing something, done something wrong, I could say, hey, that's BS, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I think that the way that the way my path has been is that to know the young woman, to understand her situation, and for her to tell me the truth. That's kind of like what happens in my life, is that somehow the person will feel comfortable enough to tell me the truth. And that's when I had kind of written a little bit about the heart of the problem. I don't mean for this to sound simplistic, but what I mean is where we're putting our efforts. If we're going to put our efforts somewhere, it's got to be in making it safe enough for people that are falsely accusing to tell the truth, and people that have a problem offending to get help. Do you know what I mean? It's like we're so in this war, and I understand that, we're like on these opposing sides, but we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. We need to like strengthen people on each side to tell the story like it is.
So
something
when we find women who actually lie about rape, like the neighbor, right? What do you think we should do to them? Like, how should we handle these issues? Because, dealing with, the assumption and getting everybody riled up that something has happened to you, we're all ready to prosecute the whomever to the fullest. So how should we actually handle the other individual who created something that was not?
Right. Well, I mean, I honestly think that what makes sense is, since I do think that if a person is using that, they've been using a sexual offense, right? They're making an accusation about a sexual offense, then if they're a false accuser, they would have to go on the registry as a false accuser. And when you phrase, like, I'm just thinking about this myself, like when I hear myself say that, right, that they'd have to go on the registry as a false accuser, it sounds nuts at first, right? But it's kind of driving home the point that I'm assuming this person's going to falsely accuse again. That this registry exists because we're making the assumption that the person's going to reoffend. That's what the list does.
So, well, let me ask you this, right? And I'm taking it to a different level, and I'm asking you from a survivor standpoint. As a survivor, do you believe that we should be standing up against parents that push charges against another young adult because their kid pursued somebody else that may be older than them?
Can you repeat
Yeah.
that for me?
So you know how we have social media, we have Facebook. You know, back in the day, I've heard of chat lines, and everything has an age. You have to be 18 years to use this platform. And yet you have people that's 15, 16, and 17 lying about their age, using these platforms, talking to people that's 19 and 20, and then they end up doing whatever they want to do with them because they are, you know, like this is them trying to live a little
Right.
than what they are, and then the parents press charges on the person that their child or kid or young adult was with because they couldn't control their kid. Do you think, as a survivor, you and we and everybody should stand out against parents who purposely ruin other people's lives because they couldn't control their own kid?
I think of like when I was raising my son, um, as a survivor, you know, like I was scared shitless, sorry, to leave my son with anybody. You know what I mean? I knew you know, and we all know that, you know, sex crimes exist, burglaries exist, assault exists, but when you've experienced it, uh, it creates panic. You know what the consequences can be. And all right, so I lost my place.
I'll repeat it.
Okay.
If a young adult that's under the age of 18 that pursues somebody older than them, and they are in the same age bracket or close to it, peers, and that parent of that younger adult that's under 18 finds out and pursues charges against the older adult, should we stand up against parents who pursue charges against someone else because they couldn't control their kid?
Okay. Um, I think I think it's about accountability. I think that in this day and age, with so much opportunity to, you know, join all different types of groups and being able to get around, you know, age groups, you know, or it'll come up, you know, are you over 18? Yes, you know, it's too easy, you know, to be able to, for, you know, a young person to be able to do that. And it's too easy for a parent to blame, you know, the platform. And you know, and again, I was just having a conversation about how, you know, when I was growing up, I'm 54. And so say if I go back 30 years, no, 40 years, you know, being 14 years old, we always wanted to date older guys. It was just
That was my next question. Have you ever
yeah,
lied about your age and dated older guys?
exactly. And so and then I was thinking that the way people got around that was that if there was an occurrence and it was usually like, you know, she's 17, he's 18, or she's 16 and he's 18, that they would go to the parents for permission. You know, like that's what the people that, like, when they had parents that were more involved in their lives would do. And then they avoided having any, because I think it was that you had to have permission if that was the case, you know, if it was that close in age. Um, I think parents have to be just as accountable. You know, it can't be a double standard.
So in a situation where a parent is pursuing ruining somebody's life because of their kid doing what they
about their
want
age,
to do, should we stand out and up against that?
well, I think yes. I think we have to hold the parent accountable, that there's a learning, there's some, like, there's underneath, there's a relational problem, you know, there's a learning problem around a young person knowing that there's consequences, and that, you know, we're always trying to, as a parent who's aware of what's going on in the world, wanting to teach our children how to protect themselves, to teach our children especially what we didn't learn, right? And so that's missing. And once a young person crosses over into that dangerous territory, a parent has to acknowledge that. It's like the same as blame, you know, like a parent has to acknowledge that their child broke the rules of this, you know, and I think we have to be really specific, you know, because obviously if a parent thinks that they have the right to do that, that they don't understand the piece of their child's accountability.
So,
yeah.
Okay, Paula, you've been watching my channel. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you've seen a few videos, because I got comments on multiple videos. I didn't really quite understand the comment. I'm going to read it to you, and if you can actually explain to me what you meant. So the comment, it read as, no sexual is abuse is unconstitutional. So it may be a typo somewhere in there, but I kept reading it and kept reading it and kept reading it, and I kept trying to figure out.
No, I went back and read it too. Like I said, when I first just literally saw what the topic was, you know, and I started listening, I was like, well, thinking it was so simple. No, sexual abuse is unconstitutional. That's what I meant to write, you know. No, sexual, what?
That's
yeah, yeah. And then I went back and I was like, oh God, well, you know, whatever. But that's what I meant to say right off the bat. No, sexual abuse is unconstitutional. But then I started having this conversation.
And the title of the video, for you all that's watching this video, the title or the caption of the video was, is the sex offender laws unconstitutional? That was the title.
Right. So, and see, when I started this conversation there, I'm not claiming, like, I don't know much about the law besides the basics. I know that the registry was some sort of, it was like a desperate attempt to confront the fear, you know, every time there would be a horrific offense, you know, usually abduction, rape, and murder, you know. But only after having the conversation, you know, with Stuart, did I realize, like, that's true. I mean, I don't know whether people stop and think that there's no offender registry for, you know, there's people that murder people that get out before the end of their lifetime. There's burglary and robbery and people that frame people, you know, being falsely accused is like being framed, you know. And but there's no registry for that. And I hadn't really thought about that. So he kind of raised my awareness back up around, you know what I mean? We get caught up in the danger of sexual offenses, and
That's right.
we start acting from fear, and terror, actually terror, because, you know,
So, like we both know that people have tendencies to make up things for whatever reason. But when
right.
it comes to plea deals or even criminal convictions, do you believe that if somebody sign a plea deal or be found guilty of, that they are actually guilty of whatever they signed that plea deal for or was found guilty of?
Well, I haven't had any personal experience like with friends or anything like that, but I've watched enough documentaries to know that sometimes it's the lesser evil, to have to plead guilty in order to maybe get out in time to live a little bit of your life. Do you know
So
what I mean?
you do know.
To make the best of a bad situation.
That's right. So you do know everyone that's behind bars or on probation and parole is not necessarily guilty of the crime convicted of or the from what they sign a plea deal. And you also know everybody on the sex offender registry is not a predator.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So since we both know the criminal justice system is flawed, and people certainly sign plea deals looking for the most lenient sentence, even when they are innocent, but yet can't afford to pay for their innocence in the court of law, should we, as employers, homeowners, property owners, and landowners, show a little compassion and give housing and employment opportunities despite people having a criminal record?
Now I'm going to be honest, okay?
That's what I want.
I think so. And I would rather invest time and energy, right? Our community resources in that being the goal, you know. Um, but it's it's very confusing. Nobody wants to be falsely accused. Nobody wants to be innocent and found guilty, but also nobody wants some, like, we're taught, especially as I'm coming from a place of being a parent, I'm coming from a place of a person who had to learn to protect herself, had to learn that, never taught, never done for me. Okay. So coming from that, I have a certain level of fear. Okay. And then add being responsible for a vulnerable person, that increases my vigilance. It increases my fear. So what do I do as a person, right, who wants for a person that even who has been convicted of an offense and has taken responsibility? I want that person to be able to build, to begin again.
So what about the
And
people who uh like have this on a record and yet did
not
not commit a
guilty of
crime?
it.
See, like
Absolutely. Well, see, for me, that goes without saying, right? But the problem is the actual offenders are the ones who made it necessary, right? The people who actually, they had enough evidence to convict them of these, so they made it necessary. So obviously people that are falsely accused are suffering under that. So clumping them together, do you know what I mean? Like, if you've been falsely accused and you're on the registry, it's like that's where we're all stuck. No, we don't. I don't think your average person wants an innocent person to be falsely accused and imprisoned, or I honestly don't. you're
think a prosecutor or law enforcement can build enough evidence on somebody that's actually innocent of a crime for prosecution purposes?
unfortunately, yeah, I know that's possible. I know that's possible. Um,
So when the last time you filled out a job application or a home application?
I have been on Social Security, like disability,
Okay.
not SSI. I worked for a long time, but I went out of work, which I went out because my sister had just died,
Mm.
and I was working at a place, like I had to leave my son's father. I was working at a place where one of the managers was on the registry, and he had started to reoffend in this work environment. And so, with the loss of my sister, bringing up my own stuff, this situation triggered my own issues. And so as much as I want people to move forward, I was glad, he was such a nice guy.